Welcome to this week's podcast. We're going to call this one Legacy. Okay, so this week there are several announcements from EV manufacturers yet again. As you recall, if you listened to the last podcast, that was about autonomous vehicles and e-mobility. And the trend sort of continues this week, but it's more focused on the auto manufacturers. And really, the focus is an impending price war between automakers and electric vehicles. So, 2022, we've seen explosive demand for EVs from everyone from Tesla to Volkswagen to BMW and now Ford. And that's largely driven by their Ford Mustang Mach E and their Ford F 150 Lightning. Well, it continues on. So coincidentally, before recording this podcast, a friend of mine sent me a link about Ford Motor Company CEO Jim Farley's comments about an impending EV price war. So effectively, EV manufacturers or automakers really reducing their cost down to the point that they can deliver a $25,000 EV in which then the cars are focused on price competition. Currently, that's not the case. There is a huge premium for EVs, generally because of the costs involved in manufacturing them. So Tesla, for example, has the Model S, which is roughly an $80,000 to upwards of $150,000 vehicle, the Porsche Taycan, and then we also have vehicles from BMW north of $50,000 as well. But if we look at the Tesla Model 3, which has been pretty revolutionary in terms of a mass market consumer EV, even that model is still around the $40,000 range to begin. And because of recent sort of changes in the market, looking at roughly a $45,000 base price for a Tesla Model 3. So that doesn't really leave much room for people who are looking for an affordable EV to get into a model. Currently, sort of the lowest cost model is a VW ID3, which is around $40,000. And then there was the Chevy Bolt, which was around $36,000. And I'll get more into the Chevy Bolt shortly. So what Ford CEO Jim Farley said is effectively it's expensive to manufacture EVs relative to ICE vehicles. The largest cost in an EV is the battery currently, as well as the assembly of the EV. These are currently not volume models, so there is a huge cost involved in manufacturing these EVs. So his comparison that he drew was for the Ford Mustang Mach E versus, for example, a Ford Edge SUV. So the Ford Mustang Mach E is about $25,000 more than a comparable sort of model in the ICE segment, the Ford Edge. So the goal is to get those prices down. And what will it take to get those prices down? One, the cost of batteries are going to have to come down. The largest cost as it relates to an EV is the battery, but the materials involved in manufacturing an EV battery. So for example, lithium, nickel, and cobalt. But battery technology is evolving, and some of those rare earth materials are no longer necessary for EV production or EV battery production. So there's a huge opportunity there. Now, China, which is the world's largest EV market, you can get an EV for about $8,000 US. But there's a caveat to that. Typically, EVs manufactured in China use sort of inferior quality batteries, meaning the battery life is not as great. Maybe, for example, the range on the vehicles is not as great as well. So therefore, those models can be a bit more cost competitive because of the quality of the batteries in those vehicles. And then also the vehicles themselves are generally not sort of premium models that we see, like the Tesla Model S, for example, the BMW sort of i4, and so on. So there's a huge opportunity there. So what will it take as it relates to getting to the $25,000 SUV? And that's really sort of the desired target as it relates to really attracting sort of a broad range of consumers. Well, that seemed to be the goal. And I will admittedly say, and as I replied to my friend, the $25,000 EV is really sort of a very risky play for the traditional automaker. And why is that the case? Well, Tesla is a leader in electric vehicles. They have the technology, they have the manufacturing processes, they have the cost advantage. So I said to my friend, well, it's absolutely not going to happen because Tesla, the moment that someone tries to achieve the $25,000 price point, is effectively going to roll out another model, which is going to be another setback for the industry. So, my claim was that Tesla has a 3-year advantage over other EV manufacturers. And that actually was kind of quickly sort of, what's the word, turned on its head based on some other new developments over the past couple of days. Well, we're getting close to the $25,000 price point. General Motors has announced a pricing reduction on the Chevy Bolt EV and EUV electric vehicles. So the vehicles which previously were at around $36,000 MSRP, maybe around $33,000 MSRP, have seen a roughly 18% drop in pricing based on General Motors' most recent announcement. The vehicles are now available at roughly the mid $26,000 range. And that's absolutely huge. So if you're someone who's interested in an EV and you can't afford to pay for a Tesla Model 3, for example, or VW ID3, suddenly the Chevy Bolt becomes a very attractive pick. And why is that attractive? I've had some experience with a 2018 Chevy Bolt. It is a very good vehicle. And if your consideration set is for an electric vehicle, either for the purposes of eco-friendliness or just having cheaper operating expenses in terms of fuel and maintenance, the Chevy Bolt is something to consider. Now, that's not an advertisement. That's absolute sort of firsthand experience that I'm providing with you here today. So when we talk about the Chevy Bolt, what exactly are we dealing with here? Well, it's not exactly a premium model, and it's had some issues as well with the battery fires. There was a production halt in February 2022 because of fire risk. But now GM seems to have corrected that in conjunction with LG, who has been the battery supplier. And now the Chevy Bolt 2023 EV and EUV are set to return to the market. The pricing will take effect for the 2023 model year, and those model years will be available for order on GM's website in July of this year. So quite an interesting situation that we have here now. Now, why is this news? Well, previously we didn't have the proliferation of electric vehicles that we do have now. So a couple of years ago, it was the Tesla Model 3 and the Chevy Bolt. The Tesla Model 3, roughly $39,000 to start for a standard range model, and the Chevy Bolt at roughly $36,000. But the Chevy Bolt did not have sort of the feature set that the Tesla Model 3 had, and it obviously didn't sort of compete as a head-to-head EV against the Tesla Model 3. So there was a huge disadvantage there. And then obviously the issues with the battery fires have hurt the reputation of the Chevy Bolt. But GM and Chevrolet are confident that the Chevy Bolt, with its return, will achieve record-breaking sales, and it will be quite attractive to those looking for an affordable EV. So curious to see what will happen there. Now, there's a shortage of battery sort of components available, which is really causing delays. VW, as I announced in my previous podcast, has sold out of 2022 EVs. Tesla has indicated that it's looking at year-long delays for delivery of its EVs. But GM has not reported what the current status is with the Bolt EV and EUV, whether there will be availability of the EV or whether there will be delays due to supply chain disruptions and various market conditions. So we'll see. So the overall point is that we are inching closer to that $25,000 price point for an electric vehicle. Considering the demand now, when we get to the point of an affordable $25,000 range EV, certainly demand will take off even further than it already has. So it'll be interesting to watch what happens. Volkswagen has similarly announced plans, or at least a concept, for the VW ID1, and they're targeting that to be a $25,000 EV as well. The VW ID1 is sort of slated to be sort of a mini vehicle. So, not sure sort of what the mainstream sort of intentions are or what the sort of mainstream potential is for the VW ID1. But certainly in the European market with much smaller roads, urban density, the VW ID1 can be quite a compelling model as well. So, stay tuned for that. Be interesting to see what happens. So moving on, so more Ford announcements. So Ford CEO again, once again, Jim Farley, he said that they are looking at moving to the direct consumer model for sales of Ford EVs. And why are they doing that? Well, it reduces the cost of the EV. Also doesn't have to focus on the dealer network and the distribution, which costs are involved with that, and holding inventory on dealer lots as well for EVs. It's been quite challenging for automakers to implement the direct consumer model. Tesla has been successful at it, but other EV manufacturers, other automakers have not. And why is that? Well, there's been quite a bit of pushback from auto dealers. It's sort of taking away from their business. It's in direct competition with their businesses, and also there are legal implications as it relates to the manufacturer and dealer affiliation as well. But Ford CEO Jim Farley believes that it's necessary, and sort of a bit of a contradiction. He believes that there's still an opportunity for the traditional dealer model to work, but in his words, the dealer model will have to really innovate and optimize the customer experience for that to really continue to be sort of a sort of a continued path as it relates to auto sales and auto distribution. Not quite sure sort of if the two can coexist, especially when we're talking about sort of the cost structure involved and really getting the EV to a price point that is attractive to consumers. Now, sort of another extension of that is advertising. So Ford CEO Jim Farley has also said, well, we want to look at eliminating advertising costs for EV models. And why is that? So I mentioned previously, again, in one of my previous podcasts, that Tesla does not do any advertising for its EVs, and mainly because they have the tech community, they have sort of the cultural sort of what's the word, kind of attachment to Tesla being something different, being something cool, being something tech enabled. Well, Ford wants to replicate that, and they believe that they can remove about $500 to $600 off of the cost of an EV by eliminating advertising costs. So be interesting to see what happens there. Now, my take on that is that, well, it's an interesting scenario. If what these automakers are really positioning to do in terms of being competitive with Tesla really holds true, well, then the sort of traditional mindset toward auto manufacturing, toward auto sales, really has to be abandoned, because it's not about what the automakers want anymore. It is about how consumers perceive electric vehicles. They want the vehicles, obviously, to be eco friendly. They don't want to deal with the cost and variability of fuel prices and maintenance, and they want the vehicles to be connected. So the vehicles can obviously enabled with the kind of experience in terms of tech, in terms of information, in terms of connectivity, much like smartphones. And so you'll hear lots of people say that effectively electric vehicles are smartphones on wheels. And I do agree with that. And so when we look at what the automobile is, or what the future of the automobile is, we should be looking at sort of, again, how the consumer regards that, how the automobile plays a role in the consumer's life. And also we need to look at the electric vehicle as not a car or an automobile, but as a mobility sort of tool. And so what does that mean? Are we looking at things like miles per gallon? And are we looking at things, for example, in terms of fuel economy, or are we looking at connectivity? Are we looking at integration, over the air updates, being able to connect to your smartphone, connecting to streaming services, being able to integrate with third-party services, let's say making movie reservations or dinner reservations, understanding traffic patterns, and so on. So it'll be interesting to see sort of if these automakers can deliver, because Tesla is currently delivering on that. So on the subject of electric vehicles, VW CEO Herbert Diess has said it's going to be a tight race with Tesla for leadership in the automotive industry, and he's targeting 2025 to overtake Tesla as an electric vehicle leader. Now, VW is one of the largest auto manufacturers in the world, the number two auto manufacturer in the world behind Toyota. And so they have the Volkswagen brand, they have the Audi brand, and Porsche, and also the Skoda sub brands as well. So they have the manufacturing capability, the scale, to really be able to rival Tesla as it relates to EV production. So it is going to be a tight race, but the key thing is, can Volkswagen deliver? So, for example, they have sold out of their 2022 EVs. They have admitted that there are some supply chain disruptions. COVID has impacted their operations. They haven't done as well in the China market as they had anticipated. But I think it's reasonable to assume that Volkswagen will get those things right. And where will they be in 2025? Will they be a true competitor to Tesla? Will they overtake Tesla? So it's interesting to watch. But once again, my caveat is, again, are we delivering vehicles sort of in the traditional mindset, treating it simply as a car, something that we get into and drive to A to B and park in various places at the end of the day? Or are these going to really sort of be true e-mobility devices that provide the type of connectivity and experiences that consumers are looking for? So my final point as it relates to EVs and the various considerations around it are, once again, Ford CEO Jim Farley, Jim Farley said that people are willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars to sleep in their vehicles. Now, it's not what you think in terms of your vehicle being your bedroom, but it is the value of your time. So with full self-driving, much like what Tesla offers, which is a $12,000 option currently, with full self-driving, for example, you get into your car, being able to sleep during your commute to work. So people are willing to pay for that type of convenience in their vehicles. So once again, that's something that automakers are exploring and that Ford CEO Jim Farley thinks is an opportunity. Now, Tesla has not fully delivered on full self-driving, but they are actively working at improving the technology and rolling it out. And they are slated to roll out a major update to full self-driving at the end of the year. So certainly Tesla is in a leadership position, and it seems like automakers have deemed that as an opportunity, and are certainly chasing that, and wanting to be able to deliver that much in the fashion of Tesla has, or much in the fashion that Tesla has, or perhaps exceed that. So finally, the last point I want to cover is about autonomous vehicles. And last week's episode was full of news about autonomous vehicles and the on-demand services and the various opportunities that are being sort of pursued and planned by various auto manufacturers. Well, the city of San Francisco has approved autonomous driving robotaxis in the city with GM's Cruise platform. So yes, so the Cruise platform is able to pick up and drop off passengers in the city of San Francisco without the assistance of a human aid in the vehicle. Now, the details are not quite clear in terms of what the scope of capabilities are for the Cruise service in the San Francisco market, whether the vehicle will be operating in, let's say, adverse weather conditions, so say rain or fog, for example. We don't know the scope of what sort of areas the Cruise service will cover, but GM's Cruise service has been given the green light to operate robotaxis without the assistance of a human aid. So They've been testing that service for quite a while. It will be interesting to see what their initial rollout of the service will be, how it will be received by San Francisco residents, and how the service performs as well. I'm quite curious to watch, and once again, lots of developments in the world of autonomous vehicles and on-demand services. It seems that it's accelerating quite rapidly, and whether there's a true opportunity for autonomous vehicles to function on public roads with other drivers, with human drivers and pedestrians. Be really curious to see sort of how that all works together, or whether this sort of remains a pilot technology and how quickly it can improve. So, thanks for checking out this podcast. My name is Mark White. Really appreciate you watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and the like buttons, and I look forward to bringing you the next one. Thanks.